All right, so here it is, the 5-year-old Canon EOS R. As you can see, it's still in pretty good condition. I use this both professionally and personally for the last 5 years. In this video, I want to share my experience using this camera. I have a few thoughts of who it might be good for. It is on the older side of cameras at this point, but it's only 5 years old and it is Canon's newest lens mount, so it has the RF mount and it is a mirrorless camera, full frame. So let's talk about image quality, because I think that is one of the most important parts to consider when picking up a new camera. How do the files look? What are they like? It is 30 megapixels, which is super high resolution. The raw files are really nice to work with. The transitions between the shadows and the highlights are very smooth. I love the look of the Canon colors. Overall, it's a very satisfying image to look at. I have lots of examples. I went through all of my hard drives over the last 5 years. I'm gonna put them throughout this video just to show you the image quality. It is great in low light. I found that 12,800 is the max that I would go to for usable photos. And usable is a term, I guess, that's different for everybody. Here's some examples of photos taken at 12,800. You can judge for yourself if you like that noise. I find that anything above 6,400, I usually add my own lights anyway, just because ambient light isn't really moving in the direction that I want. On the video side of this image quality, it shoots 4K 30. I am not a big video shooter, so for me, that was a lot. There is a crop with the 4K mode. When you put your camera into 4K, your lenses will be zoomed way in. I found that adapting one of my old EF lenses, the 16 to 35, it changed it to more of like a 35 to 70, or I don't know, I'll put the math up on the screen. But it was a great solution if I wanted to record in 4K. It does shoot 1080, 60. It does shoot 120 frames a second in 720, which, I don't know, it's probably good enough for like a YouTube video, but I wouldn't really use it for like a client project. So it does have some limitations within the video, but for a stills camera, the image quality is incredible. So the next thing I want to talk about is the build quality. This is a high quality piece of equipment. It feels like it's made out of metal for the most part. There might be some plastic, but it feels like it's made out of nice materials. It has a rubber coating on all the grips. The thumb grip, I think that's one of the most important things, because you're holding it all day. It doesn't feel like it's gonna fall out of your hands when you're holding it. I do normally have a neck strap on, but overall, it feels really solid. This is the first full frame camera to have a tilt out flip touchscreen. Try to say that fast. It feels really nice. It doesn't feel like it's gonna fall off. It feels really solid. There is a missing joystick on the back. I had to bring that up. This was a big deal for a lot of people. They were like, how could you take that away? And it was weird at first not having it, but because it's a mirrorless camera and it has an autofocus system that is eye tracking, that it does have servo mode, which both work really well, by the way. You're able to enable the touchscreen so that it could be a joystick when the camera is up to your eye. You can use either the right side of the screen, the left side of the screen, top full screen, or bottom full screen. It's up to you, however it feels more comfortable in your hands. This is something that I just got used to. Eventually, I did upgrade to the R5, and now that I have a joystick, I still use the touchscreen. When you get a workflow, when you get into the habit of using it a certain way, eventually, the joystick it would be weird on a DSLR not to have one, because that's how you move your focus points. But since the touchscreen's here, and if you're using the LCD screen anyway, you can touch the screen to find your focus point. It's super easy to use. It's super easy to adjust. Not a big deal. The touch bar on the back That's something that I didn't really use at all. I think I tried at first. One thing that I would highly recommend is making it so you have to lock it or unlock it to use it, and then lock it. And that's just a press and hold, and then it locks or unlocks. It keeps you from accidentally adjusting your settings while using the camera. Autofocus. This is one of the reasons why I have been interested in mirrorless technology, and one of the reasons why I actually got this camera. Having the ability to use your entire sensor. I know with the EOSR, it's not 100% of your sensor. On the horizontal side, it's like 88%. Vertically, it's 100%. I had to look that up. I didn't actually know. It feels like 100% while you're using it. You can put your focus point wherever you want on the sensor, and your camera will focus. It's really nice to have that ability. It is one of the easiest cameras to focus. I have several photos of myself that I'm actually in focus, where normally if I hand somebody my DSLR to take a photo of me, they will not really know how to use it. So it's a very easy to use focusing system, very accurate, very fast. That alone is definitely worth it. I think you won't be disappointed with the focusing system. So let's talk about the lens adapter and how it was using this. So when I first got the camera, since the RF system is brand new, there wasn't that many lenses available. And the ones that were available were super expensive. I think there was the 28 to 70 2.0, and it was like $3,000. Thankfully, I had a bunch of just EF lenses, all L series primes, and I adapted them all to my EOSR. They work perfectly. Some people say that the legacy lenses or the EF lenses work better now that they have like the new focus system. If you do have any EF lenses, I highly recommend picking one of these up. Okay, something that I thought was cool is the silent shutter mode. I have used that several times when shooting like a yoga class or a meditation where you don't want the sound of your shutter to distract people from their practice and you still want to take photos. I could see this being good for someone who wants to shoot weddings where they don't want to hear their shutter sound. In previous like DSLRs, they had what they called silent shutter, but it never really was silent. So now finally there's a silent shutter mode. Talk about battery life. So the ratings on the specs are 350 shots. What does that mean in the real world? I find that on a normal, like a photo shoot day, I'll take a half a day before having to change batteries. That is shooting stills. For video, it drains a lot quicker. But I was really impressed with the battery life on this camera. It does show a warning if you are trying to use some of the third-party batteries, which disables like the battery power indicator if you click through the warning. I think it's worth it to invest in just the Canon batteries. Most likely, if you're coming from a different Canon camera, you have extra batteries anyway. I am thoroughly impressed with the battery life on this camera. So something that you may or may not have noticed, I shoot a lot of action shots or people in motion. The EOS R shoots up to 5 frames a second in servo mode, which definitely isn't the fastest frame rate out there. There are some cameras now that shoot 120 frames a second, but I found that it is fast enough. Now, the 5 frames a second is in servo mode, so that just means, if you don't know what that is, the camera just keeps refocusing as you're shooting. If I felt like I was missing shots because of the frame rate, I would take it out of servo mode, put it in normal mode, and then you just have to limit your subjects to moving either up or down or left or right if they're in the same focusing plane. It's a way to get 8 frames a second out of this camera versus 5 frames a second. Before we get into my recommendations, I want to point out something. You've seen a lot of the menus in this video already. This camera is really easy to navigate through the main menu system. All the things that I've listed so far are things that I set when I first got the camera and haven't really looked at it since then, and it was really easy to find the things that I wanted to talk about. It does have a quick menu, which has things like white balance, it has things like frame rate, servo mode, it has all the things that you might need to change on the fly. All the buttons are customizable. I mentioned that I did upgrade to the R5, and since I'm switching back and forth between these two cameras, the ISO wheel on the R5 is right here. So I just adjusted this camera to have the ISO right here, and then I changed my control ring to be the aperture. So since there's no selector wheel on the back, I just took advantage of having the control ring on this camera. One other cool thing about Canon is they do constantly update the cameras. So this one is on firmware 1.8. And when I first got the camera, it was only face tracking, no eye tracking. And through software updates, they did update it so it has eye tracking, and there's new lenses being added all the time, which means they update the software all the time. Even though this camera is discontinued, they still update the software. Recommendation time, who do I think the EOS R would be good for today? So I think anybody who's looking to get into the full frame mirrorless world would benefit from getting this camera. At the moment, it's discontinued, so you probably have to get it used. And on the used market, it's about $900. I've seen some cheaper, I've seen some a little bit more expensive, but since pros have not really been into this camera, I feel like it would be a lightly used camera that you could grow with. So what does that mean? That means since it has the new RF mount, any lens that you buy, if you do eventually upgrade to an R5 or an R1 or any other RF mount camera, you can bring your lenses along with you. If you're somebody like me that came from the DSLR world and I've been interested in mirrorless technology for a really long time, they just never really sized up to the things that I needed them for. Now the battery life is great, the autofocus is incredible, the sensor is the same sensor that was in the 5D Mark IV, so it has amazing image quality. So I think if you're a stills photographer or if you're just looking to up your stills game, this is the camera for you. If you're somebody that really is considering video, there might be some limitations that, I don't know, you could still grow with it, you can still move into the R5 or the R6, but it might not be, the crop definitely is something that you have to get around. And fortunately for me, I did have a wide angle lens to make it not so bad for me. But if you're somebody that doesn't have any lenses, then it is kind of a bummer. So I know there is no perfect camera for anybody. There's no perfect camera for me. There's just a tool that you have that you can work with, and they will have limitations, but you have to decide if those limitations are deal breakers for you. So I can't recommend the EOS R enough. For me, it is a great camera. It's what I still use. It's what I'm going to continue to use. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it helped you make a decision or get closer to making a decision on your next camera.